In the brutal winter of 1875, 22-year-old Rosa Hernandez learned that her husband's love could twist into a weapon. The wooden door slammed shut, locking her in the suffocating darkness of her prison, the tiny windowless room where her worth was measured by the child she had failed to bear. Ramon's fists had become a storm that battered her spirit, each blow echoing the bitter words he hurled at her like stones. "You brought shame upon our name! You are a witch for robbing me of my son!" The cold air tasted metallic against the tears that streaked her dirt-streaked cheeks. Her belly twisted with hunger as the stench of unwashed timber invaded her senses. She shivered, curling into herself, fighting against the gnawing belief that she was worthless. For in a world so harsh, where a woman's worth was anchored to her ability to produce heirs, Rosa was utterly alone. In that dismal chamber, where memories of laughter and love felt like distant echoes, the light of hope dimmed. Days turned into endless nights as the relentless chill seeped through the cracks of the walls, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. Rosa could hardly remember the last time she had felt the sun's warmth on her skin. Instead, the shadows loomed larger than life, monsters that intertwined with her fear, suffocating her spirit. She sometimes thought she heard the soft whispers of a breeze beyond her prison, carrying the laughter of children playing, the vibrant chatter of a world outside her reach. That world had faded into obscurity, reduced to fleeting memories of joy, now tainted with the bitter taste of despair. "Rosa!" Ramon's voice roared outside, cutting through the silence. His furious footsteps echoed against the wooden floorboards, each step a countdown to her inevitable dread. "Are you hiding again? Come out and face your punishment!" The door rattled violently, a reminder that her life was dictated by his whims. The cries of the world dwindled into a muffled hush. The warmth of the sun transformed into a cruel equation of loss, penance for a crime she did not commit. She felt the familiar prickle of fear creep up her spine as her heart raced. Would this be another brutal lesson in his deluded mind? Another scapegoat for her failures? She pressed her palm to her mouth, desperate to suppress any sound that might betray her presence. The room felt like a tomb, its heavy air closing in around her. "I'm coming for you," Ramon thundered, the sound reverberating through her bones. Rosa's resolve wavered, her breath hitching as she quietly braced for what was to come. In that moment of paralyzing terror, a flicker of rebellion sparked within her, a whisper of defiance amidst the rubble of her spirit that slowly began to unfurl. She was more than just a shadow of his torment. She was a woman with a name, a heartbeat, and an indomitable will to live, even if it felt buried beneath layers of shame. As she blinked back tears, Rosa could feel the weight of despair pulling her down into the abyss. But somewhere deep within, she clung to the remnants of herself, longing for the chance to rise again. Just then, Ramon kicked the door open, the wood splintering under the force. The dim light streamed into the room, illuminating her frail figure huddled in the corner. His eyes darkened, pupils dilating with fury as he stepped across the threshold. "You wretched creature," he spat, advancing toward her, each step forward bringing an insidious sense of dread. "You've brought nothing but shame upon me. Do you think I won't make you pay? Are those the tears of a witch, or are you simply too weak to shoulder the burden of your failures?" Fear gripped her throat as she swallowed hard, struggling to find her voice. "Please, Ramon," she whispered, desperation creeping into her plea. "I can—" He cut her off, backhanding her with a force that sent her sprawling against the wall, pain exploding at her temple as spots danced before her eyes. "Don't you dare speak! You will learn your place." The cold air tasted metallic against the tears that streaked her dirt-streaked cheeks. Her belly twisted with hunger as the stench of unwashed timber invaded her senses. As she lay trembling on the ground, the weight of her chains felt heavier than ever before, that gnawing belief that she was nothing more than worthless taking root in her mind. Days bled into each other as she floated between the realms of consciousness, the steady beat of despair becoming a lullaby that rocked her deeper into darkness. But amidst the shadows, deep in the corners of her mind, the remnants of who she was still whispered. Rosa remembered the laughter of her mother, the warmth of her arms wrapped around her as they spun in the fields, the sun casting warm glows on their faces. She remembered the man she had once loved, the one who had promised her a life filled with light and who had turned out to be a tyrant. Then one fateful day, the merciless weight of her existence began to shift. A storm raged outside, howling winds rattling against the flimsy walls of her prison. Rosa's thoughts were consumed with dreams of freedom, a life beyond the confines of her bleak reality. For the first time in a long while, the sound of nature felt alive with possibility. a siren call echoing through the howling night. From somewhere deep within the forest came the sound of footsteps crunching through the new-fallen snow, a call that pierced her isolation. "Help!" she screamed, her voice barely a whisper amid the tempest, but it was laced with a desperate urgency that reached beyond the prison of her despair. Little did she know, destiny was already guiding an unexpected savior toward the depths of her darkness. As the wind carried her voice into the mountains, it would reach the ears of a stranger, a man who had lost as much as she had, a wandering soul called Santiago. Through the snow-draped pines, Santiago, a reclusive mountain man carrying the weight of his own tragedy, treaded lightly. His heart, burdened by loss, had made him wary of the world, yet the unmistakable sound of a woman calling out in distress stirred something deep within him. He could not ignore the injustice that beckoned, nor the quiet resilience embedded in her plea. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he quickened his pace toward the source of the cries, propelled by the urge to unveil the injustice that unfolded within the hidden depths of the forest. And as he neared the dilapidated homestead, he caught Rosa's scent, a mixture of dirt and despair that hung heavily in the air. Fear clawed at his insides, but he embodied purpose, resolve replacing trepidation with each step. Clenching his jaw, he inhaled sharply, willing himself to confront what lay ahead. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Santiago forced the door open, stumbling into the dim light of the chamber. Trembling inside her prison, Rosa searched for the source of her impending fate, her frail form barely recognizable beneath the weight of despair that smothered her spirit. But as their eyes met, a flicker of possibility ignited between them, a shared heartbeat that transcended despair, illuminating a path toward salvation. "Rosa," he breathed, his voice steady, infused with the promise of freedom. The moment they locked eyes, tears streaked down her dirt-streaked cheeks as awareness dawned within her, a newfound hope blooming in her heart as she realized that this stranger could be the one to break the dark chains that bound her. Together they would embrace destiny, stepping out into the wilds where the blizzards would fade alongside the specters of her past, ushering in a glimmer of life where despair had once reigned. In that singular moment, Rosa felt alive for the first time in years. "Hello, my dear friend. This is Jasper Ashwood, your narrator of Mountain Tales. Before we start, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from. A big hug to you all, and I hope you enjoy the story." One fateful afternoon, amidst the spiraling despair of her existence, Rosa awoke to the haunting echoes of Ramon's rage, a familiar thunder that filled her chest with dread. In her small, sunless room, she stared at the wooden door, the threshold that held her captive in a tale of sorrow, etched by a man who twisted love into a weapon. The bitter memories flooded her mind, nights filled with cruelty, days drenched in indifference, laughter that had dissolved into the cold silence of the heart. Standing before Santiago, she felt a war raging inside her, a tempest of hope battling against the despair that had taken root in her soul. His broad shoulders carried the weight of untold stories, and his dark eyes held depths that promised understanding. "Please, don't be afraid," he urged gently, reaching out to her with a slow, deliberate movement, as if he were the first ray of sun breaking through her long winter. "You're safe now." With her heart fluttering like a trapped bird, Rosa took a wavering step toward him, her eyes darting between the dark door behind them and the vast wilderness beyond. She had been trapped for too long, the instinct to flee battling against the kernel of doubt that burrowed in her mind. "Why would you help me?" she whispered, a tremor quaking her voice. "I am broken." Santiago knelt before her, his presence radiating both strength and gentleness, qualities she had almost forgotten existed. "I've seen brokenness before," he said, sincerity infusing his words, "but that only makes someone more valuable, not less." His affirmation struck a chord deep within her shattered spirit. It shook the foundations of her grief, allowing a glimmer of light to seep through the fissures. There was truth in his eyes, a recognition of the suffering she endured, and the flicker of kindness illuminated the fog of despair that cloaked her heart. In that moment, Rosa felt a stir inside her, a flicker of something she thought she could never possess again. Hope. It ignited within her, compelling her to take a deep breath, filling her chest with a first-hand reminder of what it felt like to trust, to wander into the unknown. "Can we really leave?" she breathed, glancing from Santiago to the dark door behind him, a threshold she had long been shackled to. "Yes," he replied, conviction threading through his steady voice like a lifeline. "You are free now." As they stepped outside, the icy wilderness met them like a long-lost friend, the world swirling around them as they crossed the threshold into uncharted territory. The brisk air whispered sweet promises of another life, and each breath filled her lungs, stoking the flame of her spirit and igniting a long-buried desire for freedom. The mountains loomed ahead, majestic and hauntingly beautiful, towering above them like ancient guardians, ancient witnesses to all her suffering. As they approached Santiago's humble cabin, nestled amidst the towering pines, Rosa felt a strange mix of anticipation and disbelief. The cabin was both familiar and new, a distant echo of dreams she'd lost, yet it radiated warmth and welcome, a stark contrast to her dark past. Santiago opened the door, leading her into the cozy embrace of the cabin. The inviting scent of wood smoke and roasting meat curled around them, enveloping Rosa like a comforting blanket. It felt surreal and comforting, as if stepping into a long-lost memory, a place where warmth and safety wrapped around her like an embrace, promising the possibility of healing. "Welcome to my home," he said softly, motioning toward a chair by the fire. Rosa sat gingerly, her heart drumming with cautious optimism in her chest, while the flames crackled and leapt, their dance mirroring the tumult swirling within her. Behind her, Santiago began to tend to the small fire, arranging the wood with careful precision, an act that felt both practical and sacred. "Why don't you tell me your story?" he finally asked, casting her a warm and encouraging glance as he knelt beside the fire. "What led you to that dark room?" The question hung in the air like a silent dare, awakening memories that had settled in the shadows of her heart, each one sharp and jagged, cutting through the delicate veil she tried to maintain. "I was married," she began, her voice trembling. "I thought he loved me. His name is Ramon." A shudder coursed through her as the memories painted an agonizing picture. "At first it was good. We built our life together, but then I lost our only child." At the very mention of her torment, the wall around her heart tightened painfully, and tears blurred her vision. She was suddenly engulfed by the weight of her grief, the echo of her child's cry, that ghost of innocence lost. "I thought that was the end of my world. After that, I was no longer his wife. I became a source of his shame, his rage." Santiago listened intently, his dark eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. "The darkness is meant to test us," he said softly. "I know that all too well." Rosa looked at him, searching for the meaning behind his words, the promise wrapped within the shadows. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, searching her eyes as though weighing his words against the gravity they both understood too well. "I lost my wife giving birth as well," he revealed, pain threading through his voice like a familiar ache. "Before I became a mountain man, I was a husband, a father to a son who lived barely a fortnight. Every day since, the echo of that pain reminds me of my failures." His vulnerability drew her further into connection, an unspoken understanding bonding their shared suffering. "I'm so sorry," Rosa whispered, her heart aching for the weight of his grief. "Thank you," he replied. The acknowledgement of their shared pain folded around them like a protective shroud, allowing her to feel less alone. "But we must remember that life also brings us moments of hope, even from this pain." As days turned into weeks, their conversations blossomed, and the weight of her past began to lift. Each moment spent with Santiago began to fill the empty spaces in her heart, a gentle warmth illuminating the shadows that had followed her like a ghost. Santiago continued to explain the ways of the wilderness, teaching her how to forage, cook, and fend for herself, a transformative process that fueled their bond forged through shared hardship. Each morning, she awakened to the crispness of the mountain air filling the cabin, a reminder that she was alive and that each day brought opportunities to grow stronger. Yet, as she embraced the knowledge pouring from Santiago, the specter of Ramon loomed larger in her mind, a dark cloud lingering just outside their sanctuary. The thought of his discontent gnawed at her thoughts, a whisper that could not be ignored, clawing at the edges of her reclaimed freedom. "I'm a burden," she confessed to Santiago one evening, her voice low and trembling as she stared deep into the flickering flames, shadows dancing wildly around them. "I can't outrun him. He'll always find me." Santiago moved closer, his presence anchoring her once more, his gaze earnest. "You are not a burden, Rosa. You are not what he made you. You are stronger than you realize." His words sat heavily between them, rich and potent. They became the seeds of her awakening. Under his watchful gaze, she began to shed the layers of despair, discovering that her heart could still sing. Each lesson, each moment shared, became a brushstroke on the canvas of her newfound resolve. But even as she learned to embrace her worth, the forest around them remained alive with whispers of danger. The world felt both beautiful and frightening, drawing her forward while the past clawed at her heels. Each night, she would dream of the horrors that had once defined her life, visions tangled with memories of violence and despair. But each morning, she would awaken to find herself wrapped in the gentle glow of Santiago's unwavering support, a reminder that she was no longer alone. One morning, that fragile balance was shattered. A delivery arrived via a neighbor, a simple letter that felt heavy with the weight of her past. With trembling hands, she took the crumpled paper, her heart racing as she read. Ramon knew where she was and was looking for her. Panic surged through her, the weight of fear constricting her chest. "What does he want?" she gasped, her voice coming out strained. "To take you back." Santiago's voice was steady. "To claim what he believes is his." "No," she said firmly, tears flooding her eyes as the reality of her precarious situation sank in. "I won't go back. I can't. I'm not his to own." Santiago's expression shifted, revealing his deep understanding. "Then we stand our ground together. You've grown strong, Rosa, and I will fight for you." In that moment, the resolve that had blossomed within her surged. She would not be a pawn. She would not remain shackled to the past. Instead, she would fight, drawing from the strength she had unearthed within the wilderness and alongside Santiago. As they prepared for the confrontation to come, a fierce fire ignited in her heart. This time, it was fueled by the belief that she could choose her own future. For too long, she had allowed the darkness to define her life. Now, with Santiago at her side, she would reclaim her narrative. Thus began their plan, a strategy woven from their combined strength, Rosa discovering that she was neither broken nor alone. Standing against the rising tide of fear, she felt emboldened to push against the constraints of her past, refusing to give in to the specters haunting her heart. As the mountains stood tall around them, silently witnessing her transformation, each step further away from Ramon's grasp felt liberating. With every passing moment, Rosa embraced not only the wilderness surrounding her, but the courageous woman she was emerging to be. As the first light of dawn crested the horizon, the world outside the cabin flickered to life with the golden hues of the morning sun. Rosa stood by the window, her heart a wild drum in her chest, tracing the outlines of distant mountains. The air was crisp and filled with the promise of a new day, yet beneath it all, an undercurrent of anxiety flowed. Today would change everything. Today they would confront Ramon. "Are you ready?" Santiago's voice broke through her thoughts, steady and calm, pulling her away from her reverie. His presence felt like an anchor in a storm, and she turned to face him, determination flickering in her eyes. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions churning inside her. "I am ready." It was a mantra she repeated to herself, a declaration that she would no longer be defined by another's cruelty. They prepared for the day methodically, gathering supplies that would serve as both armor and provisions. Santiago had shared with her the ways of survival, teaching her how to weave her own strength with the resources of the land around them. Now she loaded her satchel with food, water, and other essentials while reflecting on how far she had come. As they stepped outside, a chill wound through the air, stinging at their skin, but invigorating all the same. "Today, we face him," Santiago said, his tone serious as he observed the wild expanse stretching toward the horizon. "But remember, you have the support of the community behind you, women who understand and believe in your worth." With renewed strength, Rosa squared her shoulders, embracing his words. The loneliness that had once engulfed her began to dissipate, replaced by the power of solidarity, the understanding that no longer would she be isolated in her struggle. Together, they made their way down the well-worn path toward town, each step echoing with purpose. As they approached the town, the familiar sounds of life greeted them. Children laughed and played, vendors called to passers-by, and the aroma of fresh bread mixed with the fragrant wood smoke wafting from chimneys filled the air. Yet, a heaviness clung to Rosa's heart, a visceral reminder of the fear that had shackled her for so long. "Look there, Margaret!" Santiago pointed to a figure moving briskly toward them, the warm smile of the seamstress illuminating her features as soon as she recognized Rosa. "Rosa, you're here!" Margaret exclaimed, rushing forward to envelop her in a fierce hug. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "I had to." Rosa replied earnestly, pulling back to meet Margaret's concerned gaze. "We have to face Ramon. Will you help us?" Of course, of course!" Margaret's voice rang with conviction, her eyes glistening. The warmth of camaraderie wrapped around Rosa like a blanket. "I've gathered others. We'll show him that he cannot just take what is not his." As they moved further into town, they gathered women and men alike, neighbors who had witnessed her struggle, friends who had known the truth of her story before it had been twisted by Ramon's lies. There was an unmistakable energy, a palpable shift in the air, as more townsfolk converged, rallying behind Rosa like a protective barrier. "I can't believe your bravery," a neighbor named Eliza said, her voice soft but strong. "We all thought you had lost your chance for a voice. It's inspiring." With every conversation, Rosa felt herself standing taller, emboldened by their support. "It's not just my story," she insisted, channeling her frustration with the past into an empowering force. "This is our fight. We reclaim our worth together." As they gathered in the center of town, her heart thrummed with anticipation. Together, they formed a circle, a united front against the darkness that threatened to engulf her once more. The sun began to rise fully, casting a warm glow over their gathering, drowning them in light and strength. "We will confront him," Rosa declared, finding her voice within the throng. "We will show him that we are not afraid, and that we will no longer be dictated by his cruelty. Each of us has borne our own scars, but we will rise above them." The words flowed from her with an intensity she hadn't realized she possessed, forceful and captivating, igniting a spark in everyone around her. "Yes!" the crowd erupted, a chorus of voices raised in support. They began to spread stories of their own experiences. One by one they spoke of injustice, pain, and resilience, crafting their own narrative of strength and unity. Rosa felt her heart swell, the warmth of their sincerity washing over her like a tide of hope. As they shared their stories, images of vulnerability and strength painted in their words, Rosa realized how profound the power of community could be. No longer was she alone in her fears. They were all bound together in this moment, standing against the very shadows she had thought would always haunt her. "Together we stand," Santiago proclaimed, his voice steady and strong, reinforcing the bond that had taken root between them all. "We will remind him that he cannot control what he does not own, and we will not give up without a fight." As the crowd began to chant in unison, a wave of energy coursed through her, reminding Rosa of her own power. She was no longer just a woman driven by fear. She was a force, surrounded by a legion of fierce allies standing behind her. Yet, as the gathering swelled, a dark shadow loomed over them. The specter of Ramon. The momentary rush of adrenaline began to shift towards anxiety. "But what if he reacts violently?" Rosa murmured, her gaze darting nervously toward the edge of town. Santiago turned her gently to face him, his expression softening. "There's strength in numbers, Rosa. We've prepared. But more than that, we face him not just for you, but for all of us. We show what the truth looks like." Rosa felt a surge of gratitude. She had feared losing herself to Ramon, but with every person who joined their side, she reclaimed the pieces of her being that had been lost. "You're right," she said, nodding fiercely. "We wield a power he cannot comprehend." With their determination solidified, they made their way toward the center square, the sun shining overhead as if blessing their newfound resolve. The watchful eyes of townsfolk followed their procession, curiosity replacing the doubts that had once clouded their minds. But as they turned a corner, there he was, Ramon, standing defiantly at the far end of the square, his expression twisted in a mix of arrogance and bitterness. He radiated danger, the shadows of his own darkness enveloping him like a shroud. It sent a tremor through Rosa, her chest tightening for just a moment before she took a deep breath. "Stand tall," Santiago urged, sensing her momentary doubt as they halted to face him. "This is your moment, Rosa. Own it." With his encouragement ringing in her ears, Rosa stood at the forefront of the gathering, her heart racing. In that moment, fear transformed into determination. He may have once owned her fears, but today she owned her truth. "Ramon," she called, taking a step forward. "You've come to try and reclaim what you think you have lost, but I'm no longer yours to command, no longer your possession." A hush swept through the crowd, the tension palpable as the weight of her words fell heavy in the air. She felt their eyes on her, the strength of the community bolstering her courage as she pressed on. "What you did to me is not the truth of who I am. I'm surrounded by those who understand that our stories are ours alone, and we will not allow them to be rewritten." There was a flicker of rage in Ramon's gaze, dark and dangerous. You think you can just turn your back on our past? His voice was icy, the undertone of threat unmistakable. You are mine, Rosa, and I will have you back. A ripple of unease coursed through the assembled crowd, but Rosa stepped forward, channeling her fear. I may have once thought I was yours, but the truth is, no man owns another. We are not livestock, nor possessions. We are people. You will not erase my identity. Santiago, standing at her side, echoed her sentiment, his voice even and firm. There are many of us here who know the truth, your truth and the harm you have caused. We will not let you take her back. The tide of voices surged behind them, disparate threads weaving into a tapestry of support. Rosa! They called, and the reverberation of their unified accord filled her with strength. I never thought I'd see you standing like this, Ramon sneered, attempting to regain control. You think this rabble protects you? You are nothing without me. On the contrary, Rosa replied, her voice unwavering. I am everything without you. I am free. With those words, she felt the shackles of her past fall away, the weight of fear dissipating into the rising light of truth. The crowd responded, chanting her name, rallying behind her as the sun broke fully over the horizon, casting a brilliant glow over the confrontation. Together, she said, feeling the power of the people at her back growing stronger, we expose the ugly truth for what it is, and will not be silenced. At that moment, Ramon's face twisted in outrage and desperation, the mask of control slipping from view, but Rosa stood resolute, a beacon of strength and defiance. Enough of your lies, she called, her voice ringing clear. We will not allow our stories to be dictated by fear any longer. We choose freedom. Panic flickered in Ramon's eyes as he realized he was outnumbered, that the strength of the community threatened to overwhelm him. Yet, in that vulnerability, she also saw something else, a hint of the cowardice that often cloaked tyrants like him. Let's move! We stand united today, she commanded, bolstered by the support of all those around her. As the final chords of his last attempt at power began to unravel, Rosa's heart soared with hope, the dawn of a new day illuminating the path ahead. Together they would forge a future built on truth, and she would carve out her own place within it, one free from the chains of her past. As the crowd surged forward, an empowered wave washing over the obstacles ahead, Rosa breathed deep. She would no longer be defined by someone else's darkness. Today, the light would shine brighter than it ever had before. As the townsfolk surged forward, a wave of resolve cascaded through them. The powerful truth of their unity shone in their eyes, every face reflecting a fierce determination. Rosa stood at the forefront, surrounded by those willing to make a stand, ready to reclaim what had been stolen by fear and manipulation. Rosa! They called, a chorus of support reverberating across the town square. The sound filled her with warmth, igniting confidence she hadn't fully recognized within herself before this moment. Rosa! It was like a new life breathed into her, the very embodiment of their collective strength. I never thought I'd see you standing like this, Ramon sneered, his voice cold and dripping with contempt. Attempting to regain control of the situation, he stepped forward with calculated aggression. You think this rabble protects you? You are nothing without me. He measured them with scorn, desperately trying to manipulate their sense of belonging. On the contrary, Rosa responded, her voice unwavering and strong. I am everything without you. I am free. The weight of those words lingered in the air, charging the atmosphere around them. With those simple phrases, she felt the shackles of her past fall away, the walls built by fear dissipating into the rising light of truth. Behind her, the crowd echoed their approval, chanting her name, rallying with unyielding fervor as the sun broke fully over the horizon, bathing the square in bright, illuminating glory. Together, she said, her heart swelling as she felt the power of the people at her back growing stronger. We expose the ugly truth for what it is, and will not be silenced. The fury brewing within Ramon only intensified. His face twisted into a grimace, outrage swelling as he realized he was losing control. No longer did he command the authority that once suffocated their voices. It slipped further from view with every breath Rosa took. Enough of your lies, she called out, her voice ringing clear, unwavering in its strength. We will not allow our stories to be dictated by fear any longer. We choose freedom. The panic that grazed Ramon's features was unmistakable as his eyes darted between the houses, the people, shooting glances that suggested he was strapped to a wildfire he could not contain. He was outnumbered, and in that vulnerability, Rosa found not just strength, but a hint of the cowardice that cloaked tyrants when they sensed their power waning. "Let's move! We stand united today!" she commanded, her spirit buoyed by the collective energy that surrounded her. Rising tides were swelling in the hearts of the townsfolk. At that moment, the final chords of his last attempts at power began to unravel. Rosa could feel her own heart soar with hope. Dreams swelled in her mind, imagining the dawn of a new day illuminating the path ahead. Together, they would forge a future built on truth, and she would carve out her own place within it, one free from the chains of her past. "Push forward! They cannot take what belongs to us!" shouted Santiago, stepping to her side, his hand on her shoulder fortifying her with trust and solidarity. The crowd surged, an empowered wave washing over every obstacle that lay before them. Rosa inhaled deeply, breathing in the raw energy that filled the air. For too long, we have allowed the weight of his darkness to define us. No more. Today we take back our power. As she stood in the midst of her friends and allies, she no longer felt defined by the hurt she had endured, but rather empowered by the resilience of the community gathered around her. Today, the light would shine brighter than ever before, a new dawn sweeping across the heart of their town. "I promise you," she continued passionately, "together we will unearth every truth buried beneath the lies. We will share our scars and wear them with pride, for they tell the stories of our survival." Her heart raced, the words flowing from her as the crowd took them in, a symphony echoing the hope and determined courage within. Ramon's visage darkened further, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "You think this crowd can protect you? You think I'm afraid of them?" He shot back, desperation creeping into his voice. "You're all fools to think this can change anything." Rosa steeled herself, understanding deep down that his arrogance signaled his faltering grip on reality. "It's no longer your narrative to spin," she shot back, emboldened by the unity forming around her. "We are not afraid. We stand for one another." The townsfolk rallied to her side, echoing her words. "We are not afraid!" they thundered, their voices ringing through the square like a battle cry. "We fight for each other." "The tides are turning, Ramon," Rosa pressed, her voice unwavering. "You will not dictate our worth or future any longer. This is a town built on compassion, strength, and the spirit of community. And today, we declare that we will not succumb to your tyranny." The weight of her words landed in the hearts of those standing with her, their voices swelling into a magnificent roar. "We will not succumb." The chants blended into a harmony that echoed through the air. "Enough with this," Ramon spat. "You think this mob will save you? Not a mob, a family," Rosa shouted back, shaking off the fear and doubt. She could feel the truth coursing through her veins, uniting them in purpose. "Together, we are stronger than you could ever imagine. And today marks a new dawn, fueled by our shared truths." Ramon adjusted himself, looking desperate. "You're just a woman, and this ends now." A wave of laughter rolled from the crowd, a deep-seated laughter born from their shared strength and the injustice they had suffered. "That's right," Eliza yelled, taking a step forward. "And women like us dismantle oppression, one voice at a time." Their laughter was electric, dancing in the air as they moved closer, standing shoulder to shoulder with Rosa as she spoke. Her heart swelled with pride in their rebellion, knowing they were about to make history together. "Let's show him our strength," she called out, raising her arm in solidarity. "Let it be known, we will not be silenced." Together they pressed forward, an unstoppable force merging into one. In the face of fear, they stood as a living testament to the power of truth, to the resilience born of scars, and to the clarity brought by shared narratives. "I will see you pay for this," Ramon seethed, but the tide had turned, and the crowd was ready to confront him. "Pay," Rosa said, feeling the momentum building. "You should fear us, because the days of oppression, shame, and guilt are over. You will not break us." With that mantra rolling from their lips, Rosa found her voice amplified by the strength of the townsfolk around her. They were no longer just individuals. They had become a tidal wave, refuting the darkness that had once held them captive. The confrontation was nearing, and as Ramon retreated, she felt the shifting tides. His power thrived on isolation, but that was precisely the weapon turned against him now. Community, unity, love, and resilience. "Our stories will be told," Rosa declared fiercely, feeling the energy bubble within her as she led them forward, marching toward the tavern now filled with lingering whispers and discontent. We will share our victories, our scars, and our triumphs. We will rebuild from the ashes of our past. The chants of victory surged louder, propelling them onward as they broadened their stride. Each step was a declaration, a promise, a commitment to the future they desired. Ramon might have once held dominion over their lives, but today they would show him the profound power of collective strength. She could see the embers of hope igniting in their eyes. They had become a force woven from countless individual stories. And with each passing moment, those narratives began to illuminate a path ahead, bright as the emerging sun in the dawn sky. They will say we stood together against oppression, Rosa declared proudly, her heart pounding with each shout of solidarity emanating from the crowd. And they will never forget the strength we forged together. As Ramon's silhouette grew smaller on the horizon, the weight of their united front pressed on as they moved toward a shared destiny of empowerment. In that instant, with the sun shining brightly above them, Rosa caught glimpses of the lives yet to be transformed, stories waiting to flourish, an undeniable promise of resilience. With each heartbeat, she felt stronger, radiating warmth that washed away the remnants of fear. There were challenges ahead, but they would meet them together, arms linked, hearts open, and a future bright with possibilities shining before them. The day had just begun, and the beginning of their truth-telling was set to pave the way for new beginnings. Rosa led the way with renewed purpose, her heart racing alongside the rhythm of the town's collective heartbeat. Each voice raised in solidarity no longer felt like an echo of desperation, but a powerful call to arms, a declaration against the oppressive silence that had stifled them for too long. As they approached the tavern, an air of tension settled like a thick fog. The atmosphere buzzed with a mix of fear and excitement. The townsfolk were prepared to confront the ghosts of their past. Rosa glanced over at Eliza, who nodded back at her with fierce determination. They both understood that this was not merely about their confrontation with Ramon. It was about every moment of suffering endured by the community at his hands. Every whispered fear turned brittle in the silence. "Well, there's no going back now," Eliza said, her voice steady as they stood before the tavern door, its wooden frame heavy with memories of laughter and camaraderie that had long been overshadowed by fear. Rosa turned to the crowd and raised her arms, the gesture amplifying the emotions swirling about. "Remember, this is our home, and we reclaim it today." Her words hung in the air, echoing. The crowd erupted with cheers, their collective energy swelling like a tide, pushing them toward the door as they made their presence known. Now, fortified with resolve, they stepped into the tavern, the atmosphere shifting as the familiar scent of wood and ale clashed with the potency of their determination. Inside, the mood was thick with apprehension. Ramon's supporters stood scattered across the space, their faces a mixture of disbelief and confusion. They looked to him, searching for the same old bravado that had once filled them with a false sense of security. But Ramon was not the leader they remembered. His confident air was punctured, leaving only a wounded, cornered animal. "Leave now," he barked, struggling to maintain authority. "You think your little uprising will change anything? I am still in charge here." But it took only a single glance around the room for the truth to solidify. His facade was crumbling, and the town knew it. Rosa stepped forward, her presence a calm amidst the brewing storm. "This town does not belong to fear any longer," she proclaimed. "We've come together to take back what is rightfully ours." Laughter erupted from the gathered crowd, cutting through Ramon's threats like a hot knife through butter. "Rightfully ours? You dare lay claim to this town after everything you allowed?" One of Ramon's supporters shouted, a man named Miguel, whose brow furrowed with confusion and anger. Rosa extended her hands, palms out, beckoning for calm. "This is about more than just a claim. It's about reclaiming our identity," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "For too long we've allowed the fear to overshadow our worth, but today we choose to recognize the beauty in the stories we've lived." The laughter settled, creating an eerie silence within the tavern as she continued. "Many here have suffered at Ramon's hands. We've lived under the shadow of his lies, and together, we have the strength to break free." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. The tension was palpable. People were beginning to shift, unsure of where their allegiances lay. "Don't listen to her," Ramon shouted back, desperation clawing at his voice. "She's just trying to manipulate you. You'll regret this." "No, we won't," roared a voice from the crowd. Margaret stepped forward, her eyes aflame with righteous fury. We are tired of regret. We choose to take back our power." Rosa turned to Margaret, eyes brightening with joy at the strengthening of their unity. She nodded gratefully, feeling the surge of support from others in the tavern, echoing that fierce resolution. "You all need to see the truth," Rosa cried out, her heart pounding, a drum of palpable hope. "You deserve better. We faced storms together, and now we stand as family against the wind." The crowd's murmur turned into solemn agreement. They faced Ramon, who stood at the center of their collective ire, frustration twisting deeper into his face. "What will you do without me?" he spat, struggling to regain the upper hand. "You're nothing without my guidance. You wouldn't last a day." "We'll thrive," shouted Santiago, stepping bravely beside Rosa. "We've always been the heart of our town. You merely claimed the crown." The crowd surged in agreement, voices growing stronger, singing out their harmony. "We'll thrive. We'll stand tall." They united behind Rosa, emboldened by the strength of their collective pain that had transformed into a source of power. "I see now," Ramon hissed, bitter hostility oozing from his every word. "You're just a mob, driven by misguided ideals." "A mob?" Rosa thrust back, fire igniting in her chest. "We're a family, a community that refuses to be held captive any longer." The realization of their strength seemed to dawn on the townsfolk. No longer would they sit idly by. The tether of Ramon's control was visibly fraying, and the truth in their united resolve was permeating the air like an unstoppable wave. "Right now," Rosa called, her voice rising above the rising waves of excitement. "We have an opportunity to breathe new life into our town, to cultivate again the light that once flourished here." A riot of voices erupted behind her. Old memories unearthed joy and pain alike. The tavern was alive, transformed into a cauldron of possibility. "Rosa's right," another shouted, momentum building as others rallied behind her. "We owe it to ourselves to reclaim our lives." Ramon felt the ground shifting from beneath him, desperation clawing at his throat. "You'll regret this," he screamed, his power waning. But whether it was his threats or the desperation in his voice, the townsfolk were ready to push back against that familiar oppression. "No more!" cried out Eliza, stepping boldly toward Ramon, undeterred. "You've held us in fear for too long, and now we stand as one." Overwhelmed by the surge of support, Rosa turned back to her friends and neighbors, her heart swelling in defiance and hope. "This is our moment," she declared, arms wide, inviting them all into a shared future. "Together we can change this town for the better. Today we rewrite our stories and build our future, free from the past." They moved closer. The tide had turned, the air thick with tentative hope as they prepared for a confrontation that would signal a new beginning. With every pulse of energy that thrived within that room, communities fractured and regenerating had bared their truths, realizing how one voice could awaken others. It was Ramon now who felt vulnerable, engulfed by the understanding that power should never be wielded through fear, but through caretaking and compassion. "Stand tall," Rosa urged once more, "and let our stories echo beyond these walls." With the kindling of their united resolve igniting the air, the crowd shouted together, "We will rise, we will be free." As their powerful chorus reverberated off the walls, Rosa felt firmly planted, a force of nature blooming within the space. Today marked a new dawn where their stories would no longer be whispered in shadows, but be carried beyond their borders in defiance. The tide of empowerment surged through her, and she knew without a sliver of doubt they would reshape the narrative of their town together. Today, they would not only confront Ramon, they would dismantle the very ideologies that had held them captive, igniting their destiny as a community reborn. The air crackled with energy, a palpable tension enveloping the tavern, as Rosa stood firmly before Ramon and the townsfolk rallied behind her. She could feel their shared hope intertwining with the memories of hardships they had faced together. This was their moment. This was their stand. "Enough of living in the shadows," she shouted, her voice cutting through the thick silence. "Today, we claim our power." The crowd echoed her sentiments, their voices rising in unity. "We claim our power. We will rise." The walls trembled with the fervor of their cries, and it felt as if the very foundation of the tavern was shifting beneath them, a symbol of the change they were marshaling. Ramon shifted uneasily, the hardened bravado crumbling around him as he searched for a foothold in the face of their empowerment. "You think you can overthrow me? You're just a mob without a leader." "Not a mob, but a family," Margaret interjected boldly, stepping to the forefront beside Rosa. Her voice rang with conviction, her presence a testament to the strength of their community. We have weathered storms together, and today we face this one side by side. Today we redefine our future, Rosa declared fiercely, refusing to let Ramon's words disturb the momentum they had built. Today, we become the authors of our own stories. She turned to the crowd, eyes gleaming with the light of excitement. Let's share our truths, each scar a badge of honor, each wound a testament to resilience. The townsfolk nodded, exchanging glances filled with determination. They were no longer merely individuals caught in a web of fear. They had become a collective force, ready to dismantle the injustice that had plagued them for so long. A pulse of collective courage surged through the room, and they broke into a spontaneous chant. Our truth, our strength, together we rise. The resonance of their united voices wrapped around them like a warm embrace, pushing the remnants of fear further away. Stop this nonsense, Ramon spat back, desperation dripping from his words. You think they'll follow you? You're nothing without me. Rosa stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. They follow truth, Ramon, not tyranny. You've manipulated this town for too long. Your reign of fear ends now. At that moment, a look of panic flashed across Ramon's face. The realization that the community no longer feared him struck like a lightning bolt. The shadows that had been his allies for so long were dissipating, and in their place, Rosa stood bathed in light, an embodiment of their shared hope. With frustration mounting, Ramon shouted, "You'll regret this day, I'll make sure of it." But Rosa felt the strength of the crowd behind her, felt the power imbue her with a confidence that could withstand any threat. You have no power over us anymore, she replied, defiance seeping into every word. We choose compassion over fear. We choose unity over division. The tavern erupted, their voices lifting as one. Compassion. Unity. We choose life. Through a moment of unexpected clarity, Ramon's bravado began to fade. He could no longer manipulate them. He could no longer divide them. You'll fail. You don't understand what you're up against. Rosa held up her hand for silence, a surge of adrenaline rushing through her as she prepared to make the final push. What we're up against is each other's strength. Together, there'll be no force that can contain us. The crowd erupted into cheers, their unity resonating like the roll of thunder. With each cheer, Rosa felt her heart swell, the emotional barricade that had shut her down for so long finally crumbling to dust. Are you willing to fight for that strength? She asked, knowing that this was their moment, the culmination of their struggles igniting into a fire of change. The thunderous response was immediate. Yes, we will fight. We will rise. Then let's show him what empowerment looks like, she yelled, her voice unwavering. Together, we will dismantle the walls he has built around us and forge a path of our choosing. In front of them, Ramon's panicked expression transformed into something deeper, fear mingled with a dawning recognition of his impending loss. Don't think you'll get away with this, he growled defiantly. But the tremor in his voice revealed the truth. The force he once controlled was slipping through his fingers, the last embers of his reign extinguished before their very eyes. Eliza moved closer to Rosa, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. Together they stood as a bastion of strength, reflecting the bond forged through tribulation. We've come too far to turn back, Eliza said softly. This is our home, and we will protect it at all costs, Margaret added, the fire of resolve brightening her eyes. Rosa nodded, overwhelmed by the warmth of their companionship and shared value in this fight for justice. Let's remind him of what we're capable of. Summoning all the energy they had built together, the crowd surged forward, filling the tavern with an electrifying fervor. We will fight. We will rise. We are the future. As the crowd closed in, Ramon's bravado crumbled, standing alone against the tide of empowered voices. Each face approaching him was filled with light and purpose, no longer afraid of his darkness. In those final moments, as the community came together, the weight of oppression lifted, carrying them toward the promise of a new future, a promise that echoed resoundingly. They had risen, and they would not fear again.